Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going all the way to Tuscany, to a vineyard that's been part of a really cool experiment for the past 15 years.
Oh, wow. 15 years. That's a long time.
It is. Back in 2009, scientists buried this special substance in the vineyard's soil. And just last year, they dug it up to see what happened.
So what was this substance and what happened to it?
Well, it's called biochar. And it's pretty amazing stuff. It has the potential to help us fight climate change by pulling carbon dioxide right out of the atmosphere. And after 15 years in the ground, it seems to be holding up pretty darn well.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this biochar. What is it exactly?
So imagine you're heating up biomass, like wood chips or agricultural waste, but you do it in a low oxygen environment.
Ah, so it's like making charcoal.
Exactly. It's basically a charcoal-like material. And the process of creating it, it's like hitting the pause button on the carbon cycle.
Okay, I'm following you. Plants absorb carbon dioxide as they grow. But when they decompose, that carbon gets released back into the atmosphere.
Right? And biochar, it locks that carbon in, prevents it from escaping back into the air. And the amazing thing is, it can stay locked up for a very long time, potentially hundreds, even thousands of years.
Wow. So it's like a long-term carbon storage solution.
Exactly, like tucking it away in a safe deposit box for future generations. But how did the researchers actually study this biochar after 15 years in a real working vineyard?
Well, this research was done at a place called the Marchesi Antinori La Bercesca Estate Farm in Tuscany. They didn't just create a small test plot either. They mixed 22 tons of biochar per hectare into the vineyard soil.
22 tons per hectare? That's a serious commitment to science. But did they just dig it up after 15 years and call it a day?
No, they went much deeper than that. They dug up soil samples, carefully extracted the biochar particles, and then they washed them.
They washed the biochar?
Yeah, repeatedly with distilled water to make sure they were analyzing just the biochar itself and not any soil that might have been stuck to it.
So it was like a spa day for the biochar, getting all prepped for its scientific debut. What did they do next? Did they put it under a microscope?
Well, they used several high-tech methods, actually. But one of the key things they did was to look at the chemical bonds in the biochar.
Okay, and what did that tell them?
You're not going to believe this, but after 15 years of being mixed and tilled in the vineyard soil, the core structure of the biochar was mostly intact.
Wow, that's really impressive. It didn't just break down or crumble away.
Yep, it held its own, which suggests that biochar is much more durable in real-world conditions than we might have thought.
But was it still holding on to all that carbon? After all, that's the whole point, right?
That's the million-dollar question, and we'll get into that after a short break.
All right, so the biochar is tough. It can handle being mixed and tilled in the soil, but did it still have the same amount of carbon locked inside after all that time?
Well, it's actually pretty interesting. They found that some soil and organic matter had actually become incorporated into the biochar over time.
Really? So it's like the biochar was absorbing stuff from its surroundings even after being washed?
Exactly. It's almost like it was grabbing onto things in the soil.
Huh. So wouldn't all that extra material make the biochar less dense and less effective at storing carbon?
You would think so, right? But it turns out that this ability to attract and hold on to other substances might actually be a good thing.
Oh, how so?
Well, those soil particles and organic matter that get incorporated into the biochar, they can actually help improve the soil's structure, its ability to hold water, and the availability of nutrients for plants.
So it's not just about how much carbon is stored, it's also about the overall impact on the soil health.
Precisely, biochar can act as a sort of platform for beneficial microbes and fungi to thrive. They can help break down organic matter and release nutrients that plants can use.
Fascinating. So it's like a win-win situation. Biochar helps fight climate change and gives the soil a boost at the same time?
Exactly. But let's get back to the carbon for a minute. We know the biochar held up structurally, but what about the actual amount of carbon inside? Did they track what happened to that?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about. Did they figure out how much of that original carbon was still locked away after 15 years?
They did, and this is where it gets really interesting. You see, traditional models of biochar decomposition, they often picture it like layers in a cake.
Layers in a cake. Okay, I'm listening.
So you've got the fast decomposing carbon like the frosting on top. That breaks down pretty quickly. Then you've got the slower decomposing layers like the cake itself. And finally, at the very bottom, you've got this rock-solid base of superstable carbon called inertinite.
Okay, I'm following you. So where does this research fit into that model?
Well, the fact that some soil organic matter actually became part of the biochar structure, that suggests that we might need to think beyond just the inherent properties of the biochar itself. It's not a closed system. The surrounding environment plays a role in how it evolves over time.
So it's more of a dynamic process than we might have thought. The biochar is constantly interacting with its surroundings, taking some things in, maybe releasing others. But does that mean the traditional models are completely wrong?
Not necessarily. The basic principle that different types of carbon in biochar break down at different rates, that still holds true. What this research suggests is that we need to consider the ongoing exchange between the biochar and its environment when we're trying to predict how much carbon will be stored over the long term.
It sounds like this research adds a whole new layer of complexity to our understanding of biochar.
It definitely does. It challenges us to think more holistically about how biochar interacts with the soil ecosystem and how those interactions might affect its long-term carbon storage potential.
Okay, so how did the researchers actually measure the carbon content of the biochar after 15 years in the ground? Did they use some kind of fancy technique?
They used a technique called random reflectance, or row analysis. It specifically measures the amount of inertinite, that superstable form of carbon that can persist in the environment for an incredibly long time.
And what did they find?
Get this, the amount of inertinite in the biochar was practically unchanged after 15 years.
No way. So even though the biochar picked up some extra stuff from the soil, that really stable carbon stayed put?
Exactly. It seems like that core of superstable carbon is incredibly resilient. It doesn't easily break down or get lost.
So does this mean that biochar could be even better at storing carbon than we initially thought?
Well, it certainly suggests that the carbon storage potential of biochar, particularly in undisturbed environments, could be even greater than we predicted. And this is just one piece of the puzzle. There are many other factors to consider as well.
Okay, so what are some of the potential downsides of using biochar? Are there any risks we need to be aware of?
Well, while this particular study didn't focus on the downsides, it's important to remember that any large-scale intervention can have unintended consequences.
That's true. So what are some of the things we need to be cautious about?
One concern is the source of the biomass used to make biochar.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense to cut down forests just to produce biochar. We'd be defeating the purpose.
Exactly. We need to prioritize sustainable sources of biomass, like agricultural residues or waste wood.
Right, so using stuff that's already being generated and would otherwise go to waste.
Exactly. And another thing to consider is the energy required to produce biochar.
So we need to make sure that energy is coming from renewable sources.
Ideally, yes. We wouldn't want to create a large carbon footprint just to produce the biochar.
That makes sense. We need to make sure the whole process is sustainable from start to finish.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot where we can maximize the benefits of biochar while minimizing any potential negative impacts.
Right, so we've talked about the potential benefits and the potential risks of biochar, but where do we go from here? What are some of the next steps in terms of research and development?
Well, one area that scientists are really excited about is the interaction between biochar and soil microbes.
Soil microbes, what role do they play?
You see, these tiny organisms, they're essential for soil health. They help break down organic matter cycle nutrients and make those nutrients available to plants.
So they're like the unsung heroes of the soil world.
Exactly. And some studies suggest that biochar can create a more favorable habitat for these beneficial microbes.
Really? So it's like biochar is giving them a little boost.
Exactly. And that could lead to even greater improvements in soil fertility and plant growth.
Wow, so it's like a positive feedback loop. Biochar helps the microbes, and the microbes help the plants.
Precisely. And another exciting area of research is the development of biochar-based fertilizers.
Biochar-based fertilizers. How does that work?
Well, by combining biochar with other nutrient sources, we can create slow-release fertilizers that provide a steady supply of nutrients to plants while also improving soil structure and carbon storage.
So it's like a multitasking fertilizer. It does it all.
Exactly. And this could be a game changer for sustainable agriculture, reducing our reliance on synthetic fertilizers, which can have negative environmental impacts.
So it sounds like biochar has the potential to address multiple challenges at once. It can help fight climate change, improve soil health, and even boost agricultural productivity.
It really does. And it's a great example of how nature-based solutions can offer sustainable and effective ways to tackle some of the most pressing issues facing our planet.
So much potential, right? It makes you wonder if we could expect to see the same results in other places. Like, this experiment was in a vineyard in Tuscany. What about other ecosystems?
Yeah, good question. It's something scientists are definitely looking into. You have to remember, though, that biochar isn't a magic bullet. One size doesn't fit all, so to speak.
Okay, so what kinds of things would make a difference?
Oh, lots of things. The type of soil, the climate, what kind of plants and microorganisms are already there, all that stuff. It all plays a role in how the biochar behaves over time. So this research is a great start, but we can't just assume it'll be the same story everywhere.
So different environments affect biochar differently? Got it. So we need to be smart about how we apply it, right? Think about those specifics.
Exactly. It's like a good winemaker. They understand the terroir of their vineyard.
The what?
Terroir, it's a French term. It basically means all the environmental factors that affect the grapes, like the soil, the climate, even the slope of the land.
Oh, okay. So the winemaker considers all those things to make a good wine.
Right, and it's the same with biochar. You need to choose the right kind of biochar and put it in the right environment to get the best results.
Like matching the perfect biochar to the perfect spot. So maybe someday we'll have like biochar sommeliers helping us pick the right blend for our forests and farms.
Huh. Biochar sommeliers. I like it. But seriously, it shows how nuanced this whole thing is. It's not just about dumping biochar everywhere and hoping for the best.
We have to be strategic, right?
Yeah, we need to understand the complexity, do our research, and tailor our approach for each specific situation. It's the only way to really make the most of biochar's potential.
It's fascinating how much we're still learning about it. What are some of the most exciting research areas right now? What are scientists focusing on?
Well, one area that's really hot right now is the interaction between biochar and those soil microbes we were talking about.
Oh, right. The tiny ones.
Yeah. They play a huge role in soil health, and we're just starting to understand how biochar can influence what they do. Some studies are even suggesting that biochar might create a better habitat for the beneficial microbes.
Like biochar is making a 5-star hotel for the good microbes.
Something like that. And that could make the soil even more fertile and help plants grow even better.
It's like a whole ecosystem developing within the soil, and the biochar is helping it thrive.
Exactly. And the more we understand those interactions, the better we can use them to our advantage.
Awesome. Anything else?
Oh yeah, there's also a lot of cool work being done on biochar-based fertilizers.
Like biochar mixed with fertilizer.
Well, more like combining biochar with other nutrient sources. It makes these slow-release fertilizers. They provide a steady supply of nutrients to plants, improve the soil structure, and help store carbon all at the same time.
Wow, that's amazing. It seems like biochar is a solution for so many things. Fighting climate change, healthier soil, better crops. Who knew that something made from what we usually throw away could be so powerful?
It is pretty remarkable. It really shows you the power of science, how looking beyond the obvious and asking questions can lead to some incredible discoveries.
Absolutely. And this experiment just goes to show you sometimes the most important answers are found in the most unexpected places. A vineyard in Tuscany. Who would have thought?
I know, right? It's what I love about science. Always something new to discover, always more to learn. It's a never-ending journey.
Well said. And thank you so much for taking us on this deep dive into the world of biochar. It's been an amazing journey full of twists and turns and, wow, so much potential.
My pleasure. It's been fun.
And to all our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has sparked your own curiosity about biochar. Think about it. What possibilities do you see for biochar in your world? What questions are you left with? Keep exploring, keep asking those questions. And as always, happy deep diving.